afternoon, New York. Good evening, Tel Aviv. I'm Tracy Alexander. Thank you for joining us here on Perspectives. Well, it was one of the longest State of the Union addresses and the third longest in US history since Bill Clinton's record-breaking speech in 2000, a record he already held after his 1995 address. Now, in the 120 minutes at the podium, US President Donald Trump shone a light on his achievements and perhaps revealed a bit about his priorities. Now, in the lead-up, the White House went to great lengths to say the State of the Union would be unifying, and while Republican supporters are saying Trump offered his hand, others are saying the speech only emphasised the discord.
My duty and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too. If you work hard, if you believe in yourself, if you believe in America, then you can dream anything. You can be anything. And together, we can achieve absolutely anything. All of us together as one team, one people, and one American family can do anything. I am asking Congress to pass legislation to help ensure American foreign assistance dollars always serve American interests and only go to friends of America, not enemies of America.
And for more on this, I'm joined in studio by Chair of Democrats Abroad Israel, Heather Stone, and public affairs strategist and political commentator Erich Reimer in Washington, D.C. Great to have you both. Erich, kick us off. From your perspectives, critics say Trump spent the majority of his speech looking towards the left where his Republican base was sitting. But in his words, do you believe that he reached far enough across the aisle in his bid to achieve unity?
I think it was a very unifying speech. I think he did not just talk about the incredible achievements this past year on conservative policy fronts, but about policies that have been achieved for all Americans. He talked about the booming economy, the rising stock market, record low unemployment. He talked about successfully defeating ISIS, about us securing the border. And I think it was very much a speech for all Americans. And I think, unfortunately, in our hyper-polarized time, it is certainly unfortunately fallen as well to partisan bickering. But I thought it was a speech for everybody. And certainly there was no divisive issues really in there. There was no talk of fake news. There was none of that. And I think the poll numbers have shown that. I think recent immediate polls afterwards showed that over 75% of Americans approved of the speech. Roughly 80% believed President Trump was trying to unify Americans with the speech. And so I think it was an incredible State of the Union. I think it is a chance for us to come together, and I think Republicans are doing that, and hopefully Democrats will as well.
All right, Heather Stone, what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, Tracy, thanks very much for having me this evening. Look, I will grant that the rhetoric was toned down and he stuck to the script. But to say that the categorical list of his achievements over the last year were some sort of grand achievements that bring the country together, his list of achievements were mostly achievements that he accomplished by executive order, not by legislation. Those pieces of legislation that he did accomplish, he accomplished with a straight Republican majority, not with Democrats. And his rhetoric was exclusionary and not at all bringing Democrats, and not trying to approach and give language that would be signaling to Democrats that he's looking to make a deal on immigration or even on infrastructure or on other topics.
But looking at the response, even in the room, of the Democrats and then the commentary that followed, is there a willingness from the Democrats to even listen to the Republicans and to Trump?
They listened very carefully, and the language was still divisive. It was still not bringing things together. He was saying that he wanted to bring things together, and yet he was talking about Americans being dreamers too, and not talking about the dreamers.
Right, so talk us through the criticism there. With Americans are dreamers too. Why is that receiving criticism?
His whole speech spent a lot of time talking about immigration, but he was focusing on all those foreigners and the bad things that foreigners do to Americans. All the talk about MS-13 and that very sad picture of those tragic family, the two families that lost their daughters from Long Island. It's terrible, okay? But the language in between the lines is that this is what happens when you let immigrants into the country and they're not.
All right, Eric, to you in Washington D.C. Heather here is saying that the speech wasn't in fact unifying. In fact, it was just highlighting the discord. We know that Hillary Clinton campaigned with the phrase "better together" or "stronger together." Did Trump ironically borrow some of that in his speech in his attempts to try and bring the Democrats over towards the side of the Republicans?
I don't think Hillary Clinton trademarked the term "better together" or "a new American moment." I think these are terms that represent the American spirit, and President Trump certainly agreed to that idea. And yeah, I mean, I think the terminology certainly is a terminology that's very inspiring, and perhaps it is the same as what some Democrats have used in the past. However, we saw during the 2016 campaign, Hillary Clinton certainly did not embrace that approach. She called half the country deplorables, and I think it's certainly, I think President Trump is now trying to unify the country with all of that.
I beg to differ.
Yes, she did.
That was her term. Country deplorables.
What do you say to what Eric's saying? Because he's saying that there was some unity. Perhaps he did borrow some of the rhetoric that Hillary used. Perhaps she's also used offensive language here. I think at this point, looking forward, did Trump
has used a lot of offensive language over the course of the past year, including just recently calling immigrants who are coming from Africa. You know, I don't want to use the exact words that he used on your program, but, you know, Africa and Haiti.
Okay. So there are obviously a lot of points that Republicans and Democrats are disagreeing on, and it's holding the government at a standstill. They're facing another one upcoming. Foreign policy, of course, not a major feature in these kinds of speeches, but this America First idea in mind and putting the money back into the pockets of Americans. Trump said he would be withdrawing aid from those who aren't friends of America. Is this something that the Democrats and the Republicans can agree on?
Listen, that's short-sighted practice and policy, and I think that it's, you know, cutting off your nose to spite your face. We have or had up until this administration a very strong diplomatic corps, and sometimes America has to act with long-range plans and interests, even with those who are not necessarily your best of friends, in order to achieve long-range strategic goals. And it is not necessarily things that Americans can quite understand in the street, but they have to understand that America is a strong actor and has to be able to work with partners all around the world. Sometimes those partners are not necessarily doing the things that you want them to do on all levels, but it is very important that we have diplomatic arrangements with those countries in many, many different places.
I just want to get Eric's response before we have to go out for a break. Eric, what do you say to that?
I think that this just shows why the Obama administration's foreign policy did not work out so well across the world the past decade or so. I think the fact remains that when America is out there leading and saying there are clear good people and bad people and there are clear norms and rights out there, we not only inspire other nations to follow us, we gain the support of their people. And I think right now there are peoples across the world, whether in Russia, in North Korea, who are looking to a strong America that is assertive and is willing to stand up for human rights and for freedom. And I think that certainly geopolitics are quite complicated, and sometimes we will have to engage in more real politics, quote unquote. But I think still when America is at its best, it's when it is at its most moral.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off because we have to go out for a break. But we thank you for your insight from Washington, D.C. Heather Stone, thank you for your insight here from Israel. We'll continue to unpack what Trump did and did not include around foreign policy after the break.